So I'm joined now by a man of multitudes, I guess you could call him that. He is probably best known for his role as Dwight on The Office, and he is a podcaster, a spiritual advisor, an author, a comedian. The podcast is called Soul Boom, which is the name of his latest book as well. Rainn Wilson is here. Rainn, good to see you.
Don Lemon, it's such an honor and pleasure to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
You're
really.
taller than I thought.
I'm a gigantic human being. Yeah, I am a big, beefy, oafish lout. I'm like a stumbling Sasquatch manatee.
Oh my gosh, Rainn.
Yeah,
welcome.
but I love it. I embrace it.
Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Nice
You
to
walked
see you.
here. You're a little, you said.
I'm a little schwitzy because, yeah, I walked 30 blocks. It's a beautiful day in New York
Isn't
City
it gorgeous?
today. It's like spring decided to just be like, I am here, mofo.
When I walked out of my apartment, there were people planting, you know, the little planter boxes?
Yeah,
There were
yeah.
people planting flowers, and I said, spring has sprung. It's
Yes,
fantastic.
it is.
What's the question you get the most, you think? It's an easy one, come
It's
on.
a question I get the most is really these days is just like, can you believe The Office is still going strong and people love it? Like, what do you think it is about The Office and Dwight that, you know, people respond to? Because it really, I know that we're not necessarily cutting, this isn't your planned question, but truly, this is the question that most people have because we were just in Italy on vacation and all the Italians watched it. I was getting recognized like, oh, no, The Office, Dwight, They didn't even speak English.
Well, it was during the pandemic, it was like the most downloaded show
Yeah.
that people watched. so-
Billions of minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
crazy.
It's crazy. That's not the question that I thought you would,
Okay.
you know, maybe close to, maybe the second or third question. But this is just a guide for
The other
information on
question, and I think I know where you're going with this, is why the hell would the guy who played Dwight write a book on spirituality?
No, that's not it.
Oh,
I wanna
that's
get
not
to
it.
that
Okay,
as well.
okay.
The question is, Rainn. Why is your name Rainn? What does that mean? Where did that come from?
Ah, okay, good.
Not the first question you
The hippie parents, my mom wanted to name me Thucydides
Really?
after the Greek historian, no joke. My dad wanted to name me Rainer after the poet Rainer Maria Rilke. They were living in a houseboat on Lake Union in Seattle, painting murals. My mom was doing experimental theater. It's just straight up bohemian hippie land. And then they settled on Rainn, and I don't even really know why.
You don't know
no
why.
one knows why. You know.
You have is it fair to say that you had a complicated childhood and relationship
Yeah,
with your
it's
parents?
fair to say it was a very complicated childhood.
Is that why you are the person that you are today?
Well, going back to the previous question about why the hell would the guy who played Dwight on a sitcom write a book on spirituality and why is he so interested in spirituality? You know, it feeds into that. You know, we all have our peculiar kinds of trauma, but my mom took off when I was about 2. I stayed with my dad. He instantly got remarried. That was a really unhappy marriage that I grew up in, an unhappy household I grew up in, and but we were members of the Baha'i faith, and Baha'is explore all kinds of spiritual paths and traditions, and this kind of primed the pump for me to be interested in spiritual ideas.
But were you always, did you, because as a child I went to Catholic school, I was Baptist, and I kind of went away from it and then I came back to it.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar journey?
It's totally the same journey, yeah. So I grew up Baha'i and went off to New York City. I was 20 years old, late 80s, came to the city to be an actor, go to acting school at NYU. I wanted nothing to do with certainly morality first and foremost. I wanted to have sex with my girlfriend and not feel guilty about it. But God, the soul, life after death, the meaning of life, all of that juicy, rich stuff that faith and spirituality talks about, I didn't want anything to do with any of that. And left it hardcore. And that was great for a while. That worked for a while. And then I found myself in a very kind of deep, dark, and peculiar crisis of great anguish. And so I started to look toward spiritual solutions to what I recognize now as some mental health issues that I was undergoing at the time.
Really? Yeah, I think many people have a similar journey, and then they usually turn to drugs or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's some destructive behavior.
I did some of that. Yeah.
You did?
I wasn't like hardcore, like, blowing cocaine up my anus and, vomiting in ditches.
Oh, why not?
I know. Life is short. But I definitely struggled with drugs and alcohol. I struggled with porn. I struggled with codependence. I even went through a gambling phase, like just anything, as they say in the 12-step program, to fill the God-shaped hole. And it didn't really work for me.
Well, you talk about the 12-step program helping you.
Yeah.
Which is, but that's based on religion as well.
Yeah.
The 12-step program.
Yeah, and that was, a lot of things dovetailed at the same time. I was miserable, and before I was in any kind of 12-step, I started reading great spiritual texts from the world, because I think my Baha'i upbringing kind of trained me to like, hey, maybe there's a solution to be found in what the Buddha said. Maybe there's some answers in the Bhagavad Gita. Maybe in the Bible there's some hope and salvation and a balm for my aching, tortured soul to be found. So in my 20s, other people were reading, I don't know, Playboy magazine or Rolling Stone or whatever. I was reading these religious texts, kind of searching for something. And you've got a book on God coming out.
I do.
And I had a big search and a quest for God during that same time.
We have a very similar journey, except mine was in the 30s.
Okay.
And 30s and even close to 40s when I went on this really big spiritual journey in my 30s when I lived in Chicago. And I would go to the bookstore, I forget the name of the bookstore, and I would read, all kinds of books, Cohen and Man's Search for Meaning, and Frankl, but a lot of spiritual books, and then just searching, and the Bhagavad Gita, and I forget, it was 7 Principles or whatever it is, and I just started reading all of these books, and I came to the conclusion that God is kind of what you make it, right?
Okay.
It's kind of what you make it, and that it's not necessarily this big, boss sitting on top of us judging us.
Right.
Because that was a scary thing, and I think that's what kind of screwed me up. I'm not sure if that's what screwed you up, because you said you just wanted to have sex with your girlfriend and not be judged.
Yeah, no, it is. Like, the Baha'i conception of God is very mysterious and beautiful. However, we can't help in contemporary society to kind of inherit this kind of Judeo-Christian concept of the Michelangelo God on a cloud with a, Odin with a lightning bolt.
Who's going to strike you down if you do
Yes,
something
and who's
wrong.
watching and judging and scowling and unreachable and outside of our grasp. And I call him in my book, Soul Boom, I call him Sky Daddy. Like, this idea of a Sky Daddy is really hard to get out from under.
Yeah.
So for me, Dawn, I was reading a lot of stuff around Native American spirituality, and there's a concept in the Lakota Sioux tradition called Wakantanka, where, and that name translates as the great mystery. So the idea of God as the great mystery that exists in nature beyond time and space, that is completely and utterly removed from any kind of like human attributes. There's no daddy, God, man, patriarchal thing. It's nature and time and beauty. And that helped me shift my entire conception of the divine.
Did you ever go to a spiritual healer, a Native American healer? I did.
You did?
Yeah.
I didn't, but how was that?
It was amazing. When I would go, like I would visit a therapist, I would go like once a month. And he would tell me, you're very powerful, and he would do the thing with the feathers, and he'd pray over me and whatever. And it was fantastic. I think it actually helped me. I mean, it could have been...
Was this in like Chicago or a place, or did you go like out to a reservation or something?
No, I went to Chicago. He wanted me to go to a reservation and do the whole thing with the tent and
sweat lodge, and
I never got to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
that's cool.
But it was a fantastic journey.
We're brothers on a very parallel journey.
I'm sure there are lots of folks. I mean, we're getting ahead. I wanted to talk about your childhood, but since we got here, I mean, it's fantastic. Did you, for me to become a believer, like a believer as an adult, not a believer as in what my parents taught me.
Okay.
I had to not believe first. I had to question and say, God doesn't exist. And then I had to come back and find him. I'm not sure if that was your...
It was very similar. Very similar. I tried being an atheist for a while. It didn't really work for me.
It wasn't really atheism.
Oh,
was
you
just
didn't you didn't do atheism, but
No, I was just
okay.
like I just doubted the whole concept of God as people laid out to me,
Yeah.
as that had,
Which is a healthy
as
impulse.
broadcasted.
It's a healthy impulse. You know,
Yeah.
everyone needs to find the truth for themselves. This is a spiritual imperative. You know, for centuries we just inherited the truth of our parents, of our church, of our neighbors, of our synagogue or mosque or whatever was inherited from our culture, and you didn't question. You were not allowed to question. But in this new age, questioning is part of the program. But and you know what I talk about in Soul Boom and what I talk about on the podcast, like there is also an imperative to go on that journey and to actually question. A lot of people just kind of they stop. They're like, yeah, I don't know about God, and I certainly don't like organized religion. Yeah, I just don't know where I stand. And they just kind of stay there. And they'll stay there for the rest of their lives without kind of diving deeper. Like, well, because Don, this is, and I'm sure you get to this in your book, like it's the biggest question there is there a God or not? And there either is some kind of force that is divine, that is of this world and beyond this world, or there's just a random assemblage of molecules and we just fell together and there was just a universe with stuff. And so it's either one or the other. To me, it's pretty clear. You have to kind of like come down on one side, and then whatever side you come down on, well, then that's going to influence how one lives one's life.
Or it's all just in our own head.
I don't think that's an option.
I was speaking with the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson recently.
Sure.
And I don't think from the small amount that we did talk about, I don't think he believes that there is a God. I think he believes more that there was some sort of,
Right. That just, and that's what I'm talking about, random molecules. But I couldn't really get with the idea that there just is all this stuff. And then the thing that I really stumbled on is if there was an explosion of stuff, matter, time, energy, molecules, or whatever, why did it form itself into ever increasing levels of complexity? Yeah. What force would cause that to form into planets and stars, and then the planets to gain atmospheres, and then creatures to form on those planets and evolve and grow? Like, that's not how physics works. Physics is how things fall apart. You know, that's so. It just didn't make sense to me on a heart level. I mean, do I have definitive proof somewhere in a laboratory or an algorithm that there is a higher power? Like, no, if you're looking for that, but you know, perception is deeper than just the intellect.
So you're not talking about religion, right? That's a whole different concept.
It's really important to separate spirituality and religion. So spirituality is just a concern with the non-material aspects of life.
Before you came, one of the producers asked me, how do you tell people or teach people to become involved or to become spiritual if they're not very spiritual? And I said, I don't know, is that possible? If you're not spiritual, then you can't really.
Well, I do think
taught it.
I do think it's possible because I think it's important to get deeply curious about why we have consciousness. You know, in the Vedic tradition, there's this Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss. This is what they focus on, being, like I am being, consciousness, I have consciousness, bliss, I feel bliss. Like this is the ecstatic state of being a human being on the planet, being, consciousness, bliss. Get deeply curious about that. Is that simply neurons and chemicals and a random assemblage of molecules that formed into a brain that gave us this, you know, there's, you know, thinkers like Daniel Dennett, who just passed away, who believes that that's just, our consciousness is essentially an illusion of the firing of neurons. You can think that. There's some evidence to show that. But consciousness is the great mystery of life. No one has any idea how consciousness works. Like, we're having feelings, we're having a conversation, we're being profound. We have our traumas, we have our histories, we have our love, we have our memories. They're all dancing in this kind of beautiful dance of our conversation that we're having right now. And that's a miracle. So get deeply curious about that, and it may lead you to spirituality.
Okay. Man, we got off track, but that's okay. This is great. I want to talk about your childhood and talk about growing up and how you got to have these thoughts that you're having now.
Okay.
And the feelings that you're having now. So you grew up in Illinois. Right?
Well, Seattle, and then a little while in Illinois.
In Illinois.
Yeah.
And then you grew up, you said,
Baha'i faith.
Baha'i faith.
Yeah.
Your father was a fiction writer and a novelist, science fiction, right?
My father was a very curious mix of a sewer construction worker.
Wow.
And an abstract painter and science fiction novelist.
So, who would play his music loud?
Yep.
And you said, why did stereos have to be so big in the 1970s? I
Yeah.
love those big stereos, but go on.
Yeah, he would come home from work, being a office manager and sewer truck dispatcher. He would throw on a smock. He had this big ass stereo. He would throw on opera music, put up big canvases, and start painting and singing along. And then when he wasn't doing that, he'd be on his typewriter writing science fiction novels. And it was so a super blue collar life, which I really relate to, and a super bohemian artistic life at the same time. And I really appreciate that. But, you know, Baha'is love all the world's faiths and believe that they all come from the same divine source. So part of the weird aspect for me, Don, was reading, studying Buddhism, inviting born-again Christians into our home and discussing the kingdom of God on earth with them, praying, singing, and this was beautiful and fun in the 70s. And at the same time, my parents were deeply, deeply unhappy and not in love, and often fighting. So there was this weird, traumatic disconnect of, hey, life is love and connection and beauty, but the reality of my home life was pretty ugly and divided. So that creates a particular kind of trauma inside a child.
What was the disconnect, do you think?
The disconnect was that they didn't love each other and they shouldn't have been married to each other.
And not that they didn't believe they just shouldn't believe what
You've got to practice what you preach. So, you know, if you believe in love, then you have to bring love into every interaction. If you really believe in love, you bring it in your marriage, you bring it in your friendships, into your conversation. But they didn't have the tools, you know, they just didn't have they came from broken families themselves. There was a lot of trauma and abuse in their lives, and it's a difficult situation.
You said as a child you faced in your home abuse of all kinds. What did you mean?
Well, I wasn't sexually abused. There was some physical violence that when I look back on it now, like, you know, I think it's not okay. But I don't want to paint the picture that I was like, you know, severely beaten or anything like that. It just was psychological and some physical and emotional and spiritual on a lot of different levels.
In an interview, or a story that was written about you, you recalled being raised around constant gaslighting due to the fact that his father and stepmom would switch from moments of rage during arguments to being giving praise and worshiping within the Baha'i faith.
Yeah.
From moment to moment.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. There would be like, we would have a Baha'i meeting and we'd be praying and people would be coming, and then there would be some argument and my stepmom would break a dish in the sink and slam through the house and slam the door and then be screaming behind the door. So it's like, when you're 8 years old, that is a weird kind of mind fuck. Can I say that on
Yes,
here?
you can.
Okay.
You can say
That's a
mind
weird
fuck.
kind of gaslighting mind fuck for an 8-year-old. Listen, a lot of people had it a lot worse than me. We all have our traumas, we all have our journey. This is what inspired me to kind of leave the faith of my childhood, but then later to still have enough kind of investment in the spiritual journey to come back to the idea that maybe if I can figure out, you know, the meaning of life, and if there is a God, and if I have a soul, that maybe this will help me on my journey toward ever greater mental health and well-being.
When you were on this spiritual journey, right? And you were saying that you were doing some things. Did you have a bottom that you said, "Oh my gosh, I gotta"? Was there like you had an addiction that led you to a bad place? That and they say if you can't help an addict until they hit rock bottom.
Right.
And they want to change.
Yeah. Yes and no. When I was using a lot of drugs and alcohol, especially drugs, there were some times in my early mid-20s that I was absolutely desolate in pain and anguish. I didn't know enough to go to a 12-step meeting. No one I knew in the 90s, and I was broke. No one was going to therapy. I did use, one time I smoked some weed on Christmas morning, and I think it was laced with something, and I saw the face of God, Don, and I had a bad trip. I started having like a paranoid freak out, but it was really bad. Like I was pouring sweat. I had a panic attack, and things got, and it really went off the rails. My roommate had to come like hold me, and I was like shaking, and like we're like, should we call an ambulance? Should we not? Decided to kind of ride it out, and my heart was going like do 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 do, and I saw the face of God, and I said to the face, which looked more like a Mark Rothko painting. It really looked like, when I saw the Rothko Chapel in Houston, later I was like, oh, Rothko was painting God. It was pure beauty and sublimity, and it was kind of like this endless orange horizon kind of vibrating, and I swore to the face of God at that point I wasn't going to do drugs anymore. So I stopped with the drugs, but I didn't stop with the alcohol.
And that was the problem?
That was a problem, because then when I realized now, looking back on it, that I was using alcohol to medicate my anxiety. So for the next 10 years after that, I was drinking pretty much every day. I wasn't like getting soused and vomiting drunk, at the side of the road, but I was using alcohol to quell my naturally anxious state, because I have an anxiety disorder.
Do you think that, it seems like you were searching, right? You're always searching for something,
Yeah.
Drugs and then alcohol. Do you ever think that religion is an addiction to you? I should say spirituality has become an addiction?
In the 12-step program, they talk about the God-shaped hole. Like, what are you going to fill that hole with? And we always try and look for something outside of ourselves to fill it with. Whether that's materialism, making money, whether it's status and success and the accolades of others, whether it's drugs and alcohol, gambling, sex. There's so many ways to try and fill that hole. If you are looking for something outside of yourself to make you complete, then that is an addiction. And people can use religion.
That's my question. Or even spirituality, yes.
Or spirituality, if they're viewing it as something outside of themselves, and they have a compulsive need to master it or seek the illusion of control, then that is an addiction. But the spiritual path teaches us to look within, and when we look within, we can find the friend dwelling therein. We can find God, we can find the divine source, and fill ourselves up, like a fountain, and use spirituality in a healthy way. So, but I've certainly seen that happen, and I've certainly seen a lot of like spiritual teachers and educators and thinkers with some of the biggest egos you'll ever see on the planet. And it's like, that is the most important spiritual quest we can ever undertake. Every spiritual tradition is essentially talking about mastery of the self. And we have that ego, the insistent self that insists, I want more, I'm important, I want control, I want attention and love and the semblance of power. And that's where the battle is. That's what Jesus went for 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. That's how the Buddha sought and found enlightenment. It's not a battle against some kind of Satan creature with shiny red skin who lives in a cave. that Satan is within us. It's the part of ourselves that says, I'm more important than you, and I want attention.
Well, that search, people do it. They look for spiritual gurus right, all the time. And you said that with the ego from people who are spiritual leaders, perhaps they think that they have mastered something and that therefore they are God, right? A certain reflection of God. You said you talked about drugs, not liking or having an issue with drugs. I wonder if that has shaped how you feel about people using mind-altering drugs in order to reach some level of spirituality or to help with some level of trauma, because you don't really like it. You think it's a crutch for ketamine and those sorts of things.
So yeah, this is a very unpopular opinion that I hold, and I always, when I speak it, I get a ton of backlash. And I want to say at the beginning, I know some people that have used psychedelics, ayahuasca, let's say, or LSD or whatever, or done some microdosing, and that has opened up their mind and their hearts to the possibility of the divine. In fact, on the Soul Boom podcast, on an upcoming episode, we talked to Neil Brennan, the stand-up comic, brilliant stand-up comic.
Yes.
He
There's
found
a new
God.
special on Netflix.
He's got a brand new special on Netflix, brilliant. He found God from doing ayahuasca. He was a devout atheist, did ayahuasca, saw that there was this incredible divine cosmic force that was coursing through everything, experienced it, not just intellectually, and he's convinced that there is God. I know people that it has influenced their lives for the better, but here's the problem. Cutting to the chase. In America, we're a consumerist culture. We want, I want answers and I want it fast. And there's a consumerist element to the use of psychedelics that is kind of like, hey, you want to find God and find purpose and have your mind expanded? Hey, have we got a deal for you? Go to Costa Rica and you can meet a shaman and it'll be $1,200 and you'll do a retreat and you'll use these drugs and then you'll go back to work on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., and work your 60-hour work weeks and make your mortgage payments, and you'll have spiritual enlightenment along the way. This can be yours for the low, low price of $1,200. We want to fit awakening into a 3-day weekend, Don, and that's not the point. It's a lifelong journey. And the native tribes that use stuff like ayahuasca or mescaline or peyote, that was incorporated into a lifestyle of spiritual quest and used only at the very, very most appropriate times in a very limited fashion, incorporated into a rich and glorious cultural heritage. It's not for someone to go to a motel in Pasadena and try it with a quote-unquote shaman and just get instant enlightenment.
Yeah. And if they're a celebrity, talk about it on podcasts, right?
Yeah, well, I guess. Are they doing that? Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, I hear people all the time, but also, I mean, that LSD, that's what it was invented for, is for therapy and to help people with.
I don't know that that's true.
Yeah.
I think LSD was also used to torture people if you look at the stuff in the early 60s.
There are a number of uses for it, but people do abuse it. But if you use it in the proper way, then it can expand your mind and it can help. Ketamine and other drug therapies have helped people with, members of the military with PTSD, etc.
And people die from ketamine overdoses. Right. And I met a kid whose mind was fried from microdosing, and his life will never be the same. And they're really dangerous. There's also kind of this cultural perception and kind of the Joe Rogan kind of world of like, hey, it's fun, it's easy, it'll expand your life, and they're not talking about the repercussions of it. So I'm not saying don't ever do it. I'm just saying be really conscious and super careful. And I'm old enough to remember when people were doing LSD, and then in the 70s, and it was super popular. And then it was then they were doing mushrooms in the 80s, and then they were doing mescaline and peyote, and there's always been this kind of hey, Timothy Leary, psychedelics will change your life. And, I think some people it helps, some people it hurts. You have to be super careful. But we have to be really careful about this idea of any kind of shortcuts to to increased awareness or enlightenment.
Okay, I agree with that. Increased awareness and enlightenment. I think that's a different thing, but I do think that these drugs can help you, especially if you have anxiety but you have to do it with a clinician. I'm not talking about people who, have it at home or they do it as a club drug. That's a whole different thing, And I feel like it, you have the whole weight loss thing now, right?
Mm-hmm.
People spend their entire lives trying to lose weight and starving themselves, and they can't. And then they take Ozempic, and boom, it goes away, and their heart problems go away. There are advancements that can help people. But
okay, yeah.
But you disagree?
No, I think it can. I think that it should be the last recourse.
Yeah.
I think that you can gain a lot from talk therapy and hypnotherapy and journaling and doing the artist's way and meditation. And then if none of these things are working to relieve your depression or anxiety, and you're stuck, then yes, use a clinician and use some drugs as the final recourse in your path. But I think in the podcast world today, it's kind of like people are starting with ayahuasca.
Right.
Like they've literally never read the Dhammapadas of the Buddha or tried meditation. They're just like, I want enlightenment. I want my mind expanded, so I'm just going to go do it with my frat bros, at a motel somewhere.
Isn't it part of our society? Everybody wants everything quick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If even our attention span, you want it quick, I can, look on my phone now and find out everything about you instead of actually sitting down and speaking with you.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Which leads me to how you feel about capitalism. How do you feel about capitalism?
Well, wow, this is
You criticize capitalism in your book.
Okay.
And you said that it's incompatible. Do you think it's compatible to spiritualism?
Well, listen, I want to draw a distinction. First of all, hi, everybody. I'm a sitcom actor. What do I know?
Right here.
Right here. Hi, I played Dwight on The Office, and Don Lemon is asking me what I think of capitalism. This is a strange world that we live in, but I will gladly dive in. The point that I'm making in Soul Boom, the book, is that our systems are based on the worst impulses of us as human beings. Greed, lust, one-upsmanship, every man for himself, dog eat dog, kind of toxic individualism. So capitalism is just a tool. It's a tool for a transfer of resources. It's not necessarily evil. It's like the internet. The internet isn't necessarily evil. But if capitalism is founded on those worst, most basest impulses of humanity, then it can cause rampant destruction and create tremendous income inequality, and where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I was telling this story the other day. When I got rich from being on The Office and I started meeting more rich people, rich people, I met these rich guys and they were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They're like, hey, come in on our little investment thing. I'm like, what is it? It's like, well, we get, when there's IPOs, because we have so much money, we're able to get in with the banks on the initial IPO. We buy in, the price skyrockets, and 24 hours later we sell and we make 30% on our dollar, and that's it. I'm like, but I was like, that doesn't feel right. And it's the privilege of the people who are in the know. And that's the reality of capitalism right there as it currently works. But we need to reconfigure all of our systems along spiritual lines, around altruism, around generosity, around the better qualities, the better angels of our nature.
And around truth.
And truth too.
And around truth. I understand what you're saying because I call them the biz bros, the business bros, or the biz bros.
Yeah, I'm sure you've met plenty.
All they care about is money.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I had this interview with Elon Musk. We talked about his use of ketamine, right? And he was a little bit taken aback by it. And I said, I'm not asking you anything that you haven't spoken about. I just want to know what your experience is. You use it. And then the criticism, though, of the interview was that I did not kiss Elon Musk's ass, and that I had an opportunity to be around someone who was very wealthy and who could make me very wealthy, and that's what mattered to the business bros.
Yeah.
And not like, what are you putting out into the world?
Yeah.
Some of the things are toxic. Why are you doing these things? Don't you think you have a responsibility? And they were like, no, you should have kissed his ass because he could have made you a very rich man.
Yeah, yeah. I saw that you got into some trouble around that, and it's ridiculous, but it's this kind of, our gods are no longer Zeus and Hera. You know, our gods are the billionaire, quote unquote, job creators, these people, and we put them up on a pedestal, and we want to tear them down too. You know, we love Amazon and we love Jeff Bezos, but then, oh, he cheated and he had this thing, and we want to like make fun of him in a cowboy hat. But it's like a celebrity. We have this love-hate relationship. We want to build them up and we want to tear them down. But, you know, I do believe, I mean, I think a lot of people listening, and when I espouse this stuff, people think that I'm being naive and they roll their eyes like, oh, sure, humans behaving along loving, compassionate, altruistic, truthful lines. Yeah, right, Rainn. But look what's happening to the world, because our systems are collapsing around us, and everyone can feel it. The healthcare system, education system, certainly our partisan political system. These systems are corrupt, they're corrosive, they're toxic, they're making the world increasingly worse. We can all feel that, and we need to, I think this is what the soul boom, why we need a spiritual revolution, is about. Hey, let's transform these things by using the deep wisdom traditions that as espoused by Jesus. Like, why don't we just try and act a little more like Jesus and build our systems a little bit more how Jesus would want those systems to be built?
And realize that someone can use their power or their money or their wealth for good, and they can also use it for bad things. It's just like, it's the same as people. People can do very good things, but they can also do very bad things.
The problem is if you criticize capitalism at all, you're immediately just branded as a socialist.
Yes.
As if there's only two, like, oh, you're a capitalist or you're just a communist. Like, there's these two dichotomies. It's like, no, capitalism built on a hunger for consumerism and rampant greed is going to make the world a worse place. That's it, period.
You're very famous now, right? So you're a powerful person.
Yeah.
What kind of influence do you think that fame and pop culture can have or does have on spirituality?
Well, it's very tricky, you know, Don. I'll be really honest with you. I was a insecure, pimply, weird little Baha'i suburban kid and moved to the big city. I wanted to be an actor, and I did theater for 10 years and struggled and was poor, and then all of a sudden I happened to luck out and get this weird character on this TV show, and now I have people like, I went to Madison Square Garden last night to see the Knicks. I love the Knicks.
Oh, wow.
And amazing game last night. And people are literally like, I love you, I love you. And all teenage Rainn wanted was to be loved. I just wanted to be loved.
Does it feel weird now when you?
And now it's just like, I love you. It's like, you don't love me. You love this character that I played, you know, for years, and it means something to you, and that's great. You don't love me. So, but it's hard. It took a lot of therapy for me to kind of differentiate the fact that, you know, I need to love myself. If I'm looking outside of myself for that kind of approval and approbation, like, I'm never going to be fulfilled. The Buddhists call it being a hungry ghost.
Yeah. What is your obsession with Star Trek?
Well, I was raised by a television.
The hungry ghost sounds like a character on Star Trek or an episode.
It really does, actually. I was raised by television in the 70s, and one of the parallels I talk about on TV is a couple of my favorite TV shows, and I liken them to spiritual journeys. So I talked about Star Trek,
and also Kung Fu with David Carradine.
Yeah, Kung Fu with David Carradine, because Kung Fu is, if anyone hasn't seen it, is this Shaolin monk, priest, Kung Fu fighter, but he's very peaceful, he's very Buddhist, he's very Taoist. He's traveling in the racist Old West and dealing with a lot of like really aggressive cowboys. And I liken that to our spiritual journey of us just walking in the world. You and me being in the world, we're trying to increase our wisdom, be peaceful, find tools to just deal with our life individually.
And Star Trek?
Star Trek is the opposite. It's what we were talking about with capitalism. It's the spiritual journey of 7 billion humans on this planet moving forward, because I see Star Trek as an incredibly spiritual television show. It's all about how humanity has overcome its differences and we're able to rise to our highest level of evolution, which is to boldly go where no man has gone before and seek out new life and new civilizations, to use technology to, if you go to planet Earth in Star Trek, there's no more racism, there's no more sexism, there's no more income inequality, everyone has what they need, there's no more poverty, and then humans can arise for what they were meant. And I still believe that a Star Trek future for humanity on planet Earth is possible. And someone said recently, Star Wars is the opposite. Star Wars is all about the evil empire, authoritarianism,
Fighting.
political
it's
battles.
Wars.
Yeah. It's
Star Trek is a trek, like it's a journey.
Yeah.
The other one is a war.
Exactly.
Someone who sat in that very chair yesterday talked about her love for Star, and has a very similar, feeling about Star Trek. Whoopi.
No kidding.
Yeah. Do you know her story about she actually got in touch through LeVar Burton with Gene Roddenberry?
Yeah.
And he created a role.
Yeah,
on
she was
Star
on
Trek
it for years.
Yeah, because she said to him, if you look at anything except for Star Trek, there are no black people in the future. And he said,
Right.
I don't believe that. And he goes, I'll do my research and get back to you. And he did his research and he said, you're right. I'm going to build a character for you so that there are black people in the future.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's great.
So Star Trek, it's surprising at the influence that Star Trek has.
The first interracial kiss on television was on
Yes.
Star Trek.
And in our country, they could not air it in the South.
Yeah. They took it off the
crazy.
TV stations.
What do you attribute? Is it talent? Is it luck? Is it what, I mean, Whoopi got the role on, as, I think it's Ganon on Star Trek, and you got the role that you got on The Office. What do you attribute that to? Is that spiritual? Is that God? Was God looking out for you? Were you in the right place at the right time? Was it talent? What was it?
I don't know. I mean, then you're talking about free will. Like, nerdy boy from Seattle goes to New York, trains as an actor, works his butt off, works in the theater for 10 years, gains a lot of acting skills, and then I luck out, get a good audition, and find the right role at the right time. Is that my own doing? Is that some kind of divine parting of the clouds, like spiritual Rainn Wilson is given this gift? I don't know. It's a mystery. That's something to get deeply curious about. I have no idea how that works.
How much of Dwight is you?
Very little, but my family from Seattle was very kind of bizarrely white trash and like muscle cars and but also like playing Dungeons and Dragons, and so that's in my bones,
Is that white trash, or is that just the 70s and 80s? Because everybody had a Camaro or a Firebird then, and
That's true.
and a mullet.
I guess that's true.
It was kind of the thing.
That
and,
is
you
kind
had
of
the
the
short
thing.
shorts and the Izod.
There were a lot of farmers in my family though
Yeah.
too. So there's some points of, and Dwight never fits in, and I always feel like Rainn never quite fits in. So I know what it's like to not fit in and to be trying to fit in. So there is that emotional element that connects us.
Do you thank God for The Office?
I do thank God for The Office. I got Knicks tickets last night because I got Dwight on The Office. I was on the floor and watched them win. But so many opportunities have opened up for me because of The Office. I mean, besides the money that I made, playing a great role, being a part of a show that has meant so much to people. I've gotten other movie roles, I've gotten to travel, I've gotten to have conversations like this, I've gotten to write a book that people actually buy because they're like, oh, I like The Office. Oh, look, it's that guy. He wrote a book on spirituality. That's weird. I'll check it out. I'll listen to his podcast. It's opened so many doors, and I'm super, super grateful.
Yeah. I just, when you mentioned the Knicks, because you talk about, sports figures being gods. People know everything about the sports figure.
Yeah.
But you have that too. You're a bit critical of it, but you have that.
That's true.
That thing too, because you love the Knicks.
I love the Knicks. I love the Seahawks, and there's certain celebrities and sports figures I revere, but I also revere the Buddha.
Yeah.
So it's not an either or. Can we do both? Jalen Brunson, the Buddha.
Having your utensils encased in Jell-O, because was that the first episode of The Office, right? That happened.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you were in a hotel in Italy or somewhere.
Yeah.
And
the first episode of The Office, Jim puts my stapler in Jell-O, and it's a big sight gag. It's very funny. It's a very memorable part of The Office, iconic. Then I'm in Italy. Like I said, Italians are gaga for for the office, and I order room service. Not feeling well. My wife's kind of not feeling well. And then the door knocks, and they wheel it in, and I'm like, get my thing, and then I'm looking for my silverware, and then under a little tray is my silverware encased in Jell-O. It's like, ha ha ha, this is good. So I took a picture and posted it, and it went crazy, front page news. And they contacted the chef at the hotel, and he had big write-ups on him, and so
Isn't that amazing?
It's pretty crazy. It's a crazy world, Don.
I think that is God, Rainn.
You think that's God?
I know it is.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I would say may the force be with you, but that would be Star Wars.
Yes,
not
please
Star Trek.
don't. Yes, live long and prosper. Live long and prosper, Don.
Thank you, Rainn. It's a real pleasure.
Thanks, Don.
The book is Soul Boom, the podcast is Soul Boom, and of course you know The Office, Rainn Wilson. Thanks for watching The Don Lemon Show. Make sure you click on the image in the top right to subscribe to my channel and the thumbnail in the bottom right to watch more content from my show. And I'll see you next time.